Now, am I completely and totally unqualified to be giving literally anyone style advice? Yes. Am I gonna do it anyway? Also yes. Hi everyone, Ivy here. So today I want to talk about not historical costumes, but historical clothing. When the pandemic first started, I decided to use it as an opportunity to actually wear some of my historical clothing a little bit more often. And over the past year or so, I have learned so much about incorporating historical clothing into my daily life. Not only that, but I also feel like I've learned a ton just about my personal style in general. So while I am obviously not an expert by any stretch, today I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how to incorporate your own personal style into your historical clothing. My first tip is to break down your personal style into its individual components so that you can figure out how they actually might fit in with a historical wardrobe. Think about the clothing that you wear in your day-to-day life and what it actually is that you like about it. Now, if your favorite article of clothing is a pair of skinny jeans, obviously there were no skinny jeans in the 18th century, but think about what it is that you like about wearing them. Maybe it's because they're comfortable. Maybe it's because they match everything. Regardless of what it is that you like about your favorite articles of clothing, there will be something in the historical costuming world that matches those ideas. There is historical clothing that is comfortable. There is historical clothing that goes really, really well with a lot of different things. Maybe your favorite article of clothing is a sundress because you like how light and airy it is. Now, if that's the case, maybe Edwardian lingerie dresses are for you. If you prefer clothing that is really simple and not too fussy, then Regency era might be the right thing for you. No matter what it is that you like, historical costuming has something for everyone. Tip number 2. Don't buy fabric just because it's cheap. This is definitely one that I learned the hard way. An unfortunate reality of historical costuming is that it takes a ton of fabric. A robe à la française is probably the worst offender and can easily take somewhere between 16, 17 yards or even more. But even some of the styles that wouldn't seem like they would take nearly as much fabric can definitely surprise you with just how many supplies they actually call for. Which is why I understand that it is so tempting to buy fabric just because it's cheap or just because it's on sale. Now, we all have budget constraints, myself included, and I am in no way suggesting that you need to shell out a ton of money per yard in order to get something that you really like that fits your style. On the other hand, I have also fallen victim to buying fabric that I didn't really like that much just because it's inexpensive or just because I liked the fiber content. Now, no matter how great of a deal you get on fabric, if you don't like the fabric that much, you're not gonna like the garment that you make out of it that much either. So while it seems like a good deal at first, in the end, you have essentially wasted both your time and your money on a garment that doesn't really fit your personal style. Wear the same color palette that you normally would. This seems like kind of a no-brainer, but time and time again, I find myself getting sucked into making garments in colors that I would never ever pick up off the shelf if it were something I were buying in a store. Now, objectively, I do think that these color palettes can be really pretty, but at the same time, they're not really the colors that I personally enjoy wearing. I think that this pink and black bustle dress is easily the worst offender in my closet. I don't think I own a single article of pink clothing that isn't historical. And while I think that this color palette is beautiful, it's something that I really don't find myself reaching for all that much. And looking back, it's such a shame because if I had just made this ensemble in different colors, it would have been so much better. A word of caution on this one, not all colors are going to be historically accurate for all eras. So if you're interested in reenacting or living history, it's definitely something to consider and be really careful with your research if that's something that matters to you. Now, being consistent with your color choices doesn't just help you when you're actually trying to wear historical clothing every day. It's also something that can really help you out, even if you only wear your historical ensembles to events. For example, most of my clothing I think tends to look better with cream rather than white. So over time, I've built up a lot of accessories in that color palette, which allows me to avoid having to make an entire ensemble every time I'm making something new. This definitely allows me to devote a lot more of my time to making, say, a more elaborate skirt or a fancier jacket, rather than having to make every single piece for an ensemble. Stick with one era, at least for right now. Pretty much everything that I'm going to talk about in this video are things that I've learned the hard way, and this one is no exception. I have a terrible case of FOMO, so I have absolutely made garments for eras that I don't like at all just so that I can go to a fun party. Regency is probably the worst just because it has the best community here in Seattle, so there are a lot more parties for the Regency era than there are for any other. And so I own probably 3 or 4 Regency dresses, and I don't even like the Regency era. So if you absolutely have to dabble in more than one era, it's a good idea to just make one versatile ensemble that you can wear to a lot of different events rather than falling into the trap of making something new for every single event. When you stick with one era, it also gives you the opportunity to spend more of your time and budget on things that you actually like. When I was first getting into the Victorian era, I wasn't sure that I wanted to commit to it because I had been spending a lot of time and money on the 18th century. But unfortunately, when you start a new era, you have to start from the ground up, and you're gonna need underpinnings, support structures, shoes, accessories, hats, the whole 9 yards. So by jumping into a new era too soon, I ended up with a lot of things that I didn't really like that much just because I had to have something to put on my feet. So now I have this pair of Victorian boots from Amazon because they were cheap and readily available, and I think I've only worn them twice. They're fine, they're really cute, but they don't suit my style at all. Now that I'm more settled on the Victorian era, I've been able to slowly save up for individual pieces that I absolutely love that really fit in with my vision of how I want to look. Don't do anything just because it's trendy. Just like any other hobby, the historical costuming world absolutely has trends that are often driven by new media or even social media influencers. Right now, the flavor of the month is definitely Bridgerton, but if you stick around long enough, you will absolutely see these trends come and go. I'm sure that you've probably seen the infamous Ikea dress, which I'm not even sure you can really call a trend because it has stuck around for so long. And that's a trend that was really tempting to a lot of people because the fabric was inexpensive and readily available, which are two things that are hard to come by in historical costuming. It can be so tempting to jump on these trends either because those materials are readily available or because you're finding those things online to be really inspiring when you see other people making them. So if you don't like the Regency era, don't make a Bridgerton dress. If you never wear prints in your daily life, then don't buy those Ikea sheets. I find that when I try to make something just because it's trendy, I'm almost never happy with the end result. And that's not just because it doesn't suit my personal style, but I also find that when I'm not excited about a project, I put a lot less effort into it and do a much worse job on the sewing. There is nothing that will destroy your enjoyment of a garment faster than doing a poor job of sewing it. Don't let historical accuracy completely overshadow your style, or more accurately, your perception of historical accuracy. I think we often have a picture in our head of what certain things from certain eras should look like. And while that picture in our head is probably accurate, there are a lot of other things that are also equally historically accurate. When you picture the Victorian era, you're probably picturing something like this. And that's absolutely an accurate representation of certain periods in the Victorian era. It might even be a good representation of what the average person was wearing at the time. However, you don't have to dress like the average person of your preferred era. You can dress like yourself. You can dress how you would have dressed if you lived back then. So while yes, this is historically accurate, so is this cycling ensemble. This is a real example of an extant cycling costume from the 1890s. Somebody really had this made for them or made it themselves, and someone really wore this. And it's absolutely not a good representation of what the average person might have been wearing. But you don't have to be the average person. Not everyone was wearing the same thing, and there is plenty of room for personal expression. There's no reason that you can't wear whatever your own personal version of a lime green and pink cycling ensemble is. I forgot to film a sign off, and I do not feel like getting dressed again. Hopefully this was at least a little bit useful to you. I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.